The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and fading roses, the kind of flowers that relatives bring out of obligation and forget once the vase clouds. Machines hummed like distant lullabies, blinking in rhythm with a fragile heartbeat that barely seemed alive. Outside the glass wall, the city's chaos roared, but inside room 407, time moved differently. Everything revolved around a man who had not opened his eyes in 3 months. Ethan Cross, the billionaire philanthropist, a man once known for commanding boardrooms and headlines, now reduced to a motionless frame beneath white sheets. Nurse Alina Rivera stood at his bedside, her latex gloves whispering as she adjusted his IV line. She was 26, small-boned, with dark, tired eyes that spoke of too many night shifts and too little sleep. To most, Ethan was just another patient, one of the dozens of rich men who came here for privacy care. But to Alina, he was more than that. There was something hauntingly human about his stillness. Every morning, as she gently sponged his motionless limbs, she whispered softly, "Good morning, Mr. Cross. It's another day." "You're doing well," her colleagues teased her. "You talk to him like he can hear you," said Julia, the senior nurse, rolling her eyes one evening. Alina just smiled faintly. "Maybe he can. Sometimes the soul hears what the body can't." They didn't understand. Alina had grown up watching her father slip into a coma after an accident, only to die 2 years later in the same silence. She'd promised herself back then that if she ever cared for someone like him, she would treat them like they were still here. That promise clung to her like a second skin. On this particular morning, the storm outside mirrored her exhaustion. Rain battered the hospital windows as lightning lit up Ethan's still face. She hummed softly, a melody her mother used to sing when times were hard. The power flickered. For a moment, the heart monitor went black and her pulse jumped. Then it blinked again, steady, alive. Relief washed over her and she sighed. "You scared me there, Mr. Cross. Don't you dare do that again." Her voice trembled with an odd warmth, as if she were scolding someone she cared for. She leaned closer, carefully lifting his arm to clean around the IV. His skin was cool but not lifeless. His features, strong jaw, faint stubble, a hint of former strength, were like a statue caught between life and death. As she worked, she noticed something strange. His fingers twitched, just slightly, like a whisper. She froze. It was probably a reflex, she told herself. That's what they always said in training. Still, her breath caught in her throat. She waited. The silence stretched long and heavy. Nothing. Reflex, she murmured to herself, forcing a shaky smile. Yet something inside her refused to dismiss it. She continued bathing him, her movements slower now, gentler. For a moment she imagined him waking, those famous blue eyes opening, confusion giving way to recognition. She wondered what kind of man he'd be. Would he even remember the girl who'd washed his face every day while the world forgot him? Suddenly the storm outside boomed. The room lights flickered again, and then went completely dark. The machines stuttered, their rhythmic beeps swallowed by silence. Alina gasped. Emergency power should have kicked in, but nothing did. In the faint emergency glow from the hallway, she saw Ethan's chest fall still. No, she whispered, rushing to check his vitals. Her trembling hands pressed against his neck. Nothing. Panic surged through her veins. She hit the alarm button, but it didn't respond. The power outage had disabled it. The storm raged louder, as if mocking her fear. Alone in that silent room, Alina made a decision that would change her life forever. She climbed onto the bed, straddling his unmoving chest, and began compressions with all her strength. "Come on, Mr. Cross, don't you give up on me now." Her tears mingled with sweat as thunder cracked again. She pumped, breathed, prayed. The smell of ozone filled the air, and then, out of nowhere, a spark. A jolt of electricity arced from the broken light fixture above, striking near the bed. She flinched but didn't stop. Her hands pressed harder. Breathe. And then, just as suddenly as it had stopped, the monitor flickered back to life. A faint, hesitant beep echoed through the room. Then another. Then steady rhythm. Alina collapsed to her knees, sobbing with relief. Ethan's chest rose weakly, a fragile sign of life returning. But what she didn't see, as she buried her face in trembling hands, was that his fingers twitched again. This time, not as a reflex, but as if trying to reach for her. In that dim, flickering room, life stirred where there had been none, and something unseen began to awaken inside him. When the storm passed, Dawn broke over the city like a silent apology. The hospital corridors glowed pale gold, and nurses shuffled about with tired smiles, ready to face another day. But in room 407 the air felt different, charged, alive. Alina stood near the bed, watching the soft rise and fall of Ethan's chest. His heartbeat was steady now, stronger than before. She had barely slept. Her uniform was wrinkled, her hair a tangled mess, but none of it mattered. She had brought him back. No one believed her story about the power outage or the spark from the ceiling. The hospital systems had recorded nothing unusual. Probably just a glitch, the head nurse said. You were lucky, that's all. But Alina knew it wasn't luck. Something had happened in that room, something she couldn't explain. When she'd pressed on his chest, she swore she'd felt a flicker beneath her hands, like a current passing through both of them. As she changed his linens that morning, she spoke softly. You're fighting, aren't you, Mr. Cross? I knew there was more in you than just machines keeping you alive. She didn't expect an answer, but it comforted her to fill the silence. That's how she had survived most of her life, by talking into the quiet, hoping someone, somewhere, might hear. Alina had grown up in the outskirts of the city, in a small house that always smelled faintly of detergent and burnt rice. Her mother had worked double shifts in a garment factory. Her father had driven a taxi until the night a drunk driver stole everything from them. Alina was 14 then. The image of her father lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by indifferent doctors, had carved itself into her soul. She remembered gripping his hand, whispering, "Please come back, Papa," over and over, until one day he didn't. That helplessness had never left her. Nursing became her rebellion, her way of defying the universe that took too easily and gave too little. But it hadn't been easy. She'd faced humiliation for being the charity scholarship girl in medical school, for working part-time as a janitor just to afford textbooks. Even now she sent half her pay home for her mother's medicines. She had learned to swallow pride the way others swallowed air. As she sat beside Ethan's bed, she wondered what kind of pain he had known before falling into this state. The tabloids called him a cold-hearted mogul, a ruthless investor who crushed smaller businesses without mercy. Yet, when she looked at him now, his face pale but peaceful, lips parted as though mid-thought, he didn't look cruel. He looked lost. Later that afternoon, Dr. Malik, the neurologist, entered with his usual briskness. "Vitals are improving," he said, scanning the chart. Remarkable, actually. "It's like his system rebooted overnight. Keep monitoring brain activity. If this trend continues, we might start mild stimulus therapy." Alina nodded, but curiosity got the better of her. "Doctor, do people ever wake up after so long?" He smiled faintly. "Sometimes, but rarely without reason. The brain's a mystery, Nurse Rivera. Some people just find their way back." When he left, her gaze drifted to Ethan again. She noticed a small scar near his temple just below the hairline, almost hidden. It wasn't from his accident, she realized. It looked older, healed years ago. For a moment, she traced the air above it with her gloved finger, wondering what kind of life had carved those invisible wounds beneath his skin. Hours passed. The sun sank low, spilling orange light across the room. The world outside moved on, but Alina stayed. Her routine was simple now: clean, check, whisper. The nurses on other shifts teased her devotion, but she didn't care. Something deep in her chest told her that this man's story wasn't over. As night approached, she pulled the blanket higher, careful not to disturb the tubes. "Rest well, Mr. Cross," she whispered. "You've got more to say to this world." "I can feel it." Then as she turned to leave, a faint sound stopped her. It was soft, almost like a sigh. She froze, her hand hovering over the doorknob. She turned back slowly, heart pounding. Ethan's lips had parted slightly. She leaned closer, holding her breath. There it was again, a faint, broken whisper. It could have been air, could have been her imagination. But she swore she heard him murmur something. One word, "Why?" Her pulse roared in her ears. She stumbled back, eyes wide, staring at his face. His eyelids fluttered, just once, like a dream's shadow crossing over. Then he went still again. Trembling, Alina pressed the intercom. "Dr. Malik, you need to come. Now." Her voice shook, part fear, part disbelief. Because for the first time since his accident, Ethan Cross had spoken. And that single word, "why?" hung in the air like a question neither of them yet understood. The word lingered in Alina's mind long after Dr. Malik and his team had swarmed into the room. Why? It was such a small word, yet it carried the weight of an entire lifetime, a question, a cry, perhaps even a regret. Ethan had not spoken again since that night. The doctors ran scans, tested reflexes, checked for anomalies. The machines told them he was stable, the readings normal, but Alina knew better. Something had shifted inside him. It wasn't just the twitch of a muscle or the random firing of neurons. His breathing had changed. It carried rhythm now, purpose. The stillness that had once defined him was breaking, piece by fragile piece. Over the next few days, she began noticing small movements, a tremor in his eyelids, a faint turn of his head when she spoke, the subtle rise of his pulse when she played music. None of it was enough to convince the others. To them, it was involuntary response. To her, it was a whisper from a man trying to return from somewhere far away. During one quiet evening shift, she adjusted his pillow and murmured, "You said something that night, didn't you? I heard it. Why? Maybe you're asking why you're still here, or why I didn't let go." She paused, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Because sometimes we don't get to choose. Life makes the choice for us." Unbeknownst to her, one of the senior nurses, Julia, stood at the doorway watching. Julia had always been skeptical of Alina's attachment to the patient. Later that night in the break room, she whispered to another nurse, "She's losing it. Talks to that man like he's her lover. It's not healthy." Rumors spread quickly in the ward. Whispers turned into jokes and jokes into judgment. By the end of the week, even Dr. Malik called Alina into his office. He sighed, removing his glasses. "Nurse Rivera, I've received a few reports about your conduct. Spending extended hours with Mr. Cross, talking to him long after your shift, humming songs. You're an excellent nurse, but boundaries are important." Her throat tightened. "With respect, sir, I'm not crossing any lines. I just believe he can hear me." Dr. Malik's gaze softened but stayed firm. "Faith has its place, Alina, but in medicine we rely on evidence. We can't afford emotional involvement. It clouds judgment. Please keep things professional." She nodded, swallowing her protest, but inside something burned. They don't understand. That night, as she returned to room 407, she found Ethan bathed in moonlight, his face calm, almost serene. Sitting beside him, she whispered, "They think I'm foolish for believing in you. But that's okay. People once thought I was foolish for believing my father would wake up too." She laughed softly, a brittle sound. "I guess I didn't learn my lesson." Her laughter faded into silence. The only sound was the rhythmic beeping of the monitor, steady and sure, like a metronome marking time. She reached out and placed her hand gently over his. His fingers were cold, but beneath them, she felt the faintest tremor. Her eyes widened. Slowly, painfully slowly, his thumb moved, brushing against her palm. Tears welled in her eyes. "Ethan, can you hear me?" she whispered. No response. But the movement had been real, she was sure of it. Over the next few hours, she stayed by his side, documenting every sign, every flicker. When she finally left at dawn, she was both exhausted and exhilarated. She couldn't wait to tell Dr. Malik. But fate had other plans. When she returned later that morning, the room was filled with strangers, 3 men in dark suits, their presence radiating quiet authority. One of them looked up as she entered. "You're Nurse Rivera?" "Yes," she replied hesitantly. "We represent the Cross family estate," the man said, flashing a badge she barely glanced at. "Mr. Cross's condition is a private matter. From this moment on, all non-essential staff will be rotated out. Only assigned personnel will have clearance." Her stomach dropped. "You can't mean you'll be reassigned," he interrupted coolly. It's not personal, but it was. Every fiber of her being rebelled. "He's responding. You can't just pull me off his care now." The man gave a polite but dismissive smile. "Your services have been noted. That'll be all." They walked past her, leaving the scent of expensive cologne and authority in their wake. Alina stood frozen, her pulse thundering. Reassigned. After everything. Later, in the staff room, Julia's voice carried smug satisfaction. Told you, the rich don't like anyone getting too close. Alina barely heard her. Her thoughts were already racing. No, I can't leave him. Not now. That night, long after her shift ended, she returned to room 407. The lights were dim, the machines steady. She stood by the doorway, torn between fear and faith. Just one more time, she whispered to herself. She stepped closer, brushing a hand over his arm. I don't know if I'll be allowed to see you again, she said softly, voice trembling. But please, if you can hear me, wake up, show them I'm not crazy. A single tear rolled down her cheek and landed on his hand. And then, without warning, his fingers curled weakly around hers. Her breath caught. His eyelids fluttered once, twice, and then, slowly, painfully, they opened. She gasped, covering her mouth as those blue eyes, dazed and lost, met hers for the first time. Where am I? He rasped. Alina's heart stopped. Ethan Cross was awake. For a long moment, the world stood still. The monitors beeped softly, the rain tapped gently against the window, and Alina's breath came in trembling gasps. She stared at him, at Ethan Cross, alive, awake, his blue eyes open for the first time in months. His gaze was hazy, unfocused, as though he were looking through a dream, but the life in them was undeniable. You're awake, she stammered, barely believing the words leaving her lips. His lips parted again, dry and trembling. Where am I? His voice was broken, rasping like the first words of a man reborn. You're in St. Gabriel's Hospital, she whispered, fighting to steady her shaking hands. You've been in a coma for almost 3 months. He blinked slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. 3 months? Yes, her eyes glistened. You were in a car accident. They said you might not wake up. He turned his head slightly, grimacing in pain at the effort. And you? Her heart skipped. I'm your nurse. Alina Rivera. He studied her face for a moment, those kind brown eyes, the gentle worry lining her expression. There was something familiar in her voice, something that had been reaching him even in the depths of his unconsciousness. I remember a voice, he murmured. A soft one, talking, singing. She felt a shiver crawl up her spine. That was me, she said quietly. I talk to you every day. I didn't want you to feel alone. His lips curved into the faintest, weary smile. Then maybe... That's why I came back. Tears blurred her vision. She wanted to say something, anything, but before she could, the door burst open. Doctors, nurses, and the suited men from the estate poured in. Gasps, hurried words, and beeping machines filled the air. The calm, sacred moment they had shared shattered instantly. Mr. Cross is conscious, Dr. Malik exclaimed, rushing to the bedside. Unbelievable. Nurse Rivera, get his vitals. No, never mind, I'll do it. Someone page ICU. One of the men in suits, tall, cold-eyed, clearly used to control, stepped forward. Mr. Cross, can you hear me? I'm Richard Cole, your family's legal advisor. We'll take it from here. Ethan's brow furrowed weakly. Who? Rest, sir, Cole said smoothly. Everything will be explained. You've been through an ordeal. The chaos swallowed Alina. Someone pushed her back gently but firmly. Dr. Malik was giving orders. The legal advisor was already on his phone. Reporters would be at the gate soon. The air of Cross Industries waking up was international news. Alina stood at the edge of the room, invisible again. She should have been elated. Her patient had survived, defying every prediction, but instead, a hollow ache spread through her chest. The miracle she'd prayed for had arrived, but somehow it didn't feel like hers anymore. When the commotion finally died down, she lingered near the door. Ethan lay still again, exhausted by the storm of attention. His eyelids fluttered, and when they opened, his gaze searched the room until it found her. For a moment, time folded in on itself. The noise, the people, the sterile brightness, all faded away. Only the two of them existed. His lips moved. Don't go. Her breath caught. I'll be right outside, she whispered, forcing a small, reassuring smile before stepping out. But she didn't get far. Outside in the hallway, Richard Cole intercepted her. Nurse Rivera, he said, voice clipped. I appreciate your service, but as of now, Mr. Cross's care will be handled by a private medical team. You're relieved from this case, effective immediately. Alina blinked, stunned. You can't do that, he just woke up. He needs familiarity. What he needs, Cole interrupted coolly, is discretion. Mr. Cross's recovery is now a matter of privacy and corporate interest. You'll sign a confidentiality agreement and return your clearance card by the end of your shift. Her throat burned. He's not a company. He's a person. Cole's smile didn't reach his eyes. You're a nurse, not his savior. With that, he turned away, leaving her trembling in the corridor, tears stinging her eyes. For the next 2 days, she was reassigned to another floor. She threw herself into work, forcing herself not to look up at the elevators that led to the VIP wing. She tried to convince herself that he was safe now, that her part in his story was over. But every time she passed room 407, she felt that invisible thread tugging at her heart. On the third night, unable to bear it anymore, she slipped back toward the restricted floor. The hallway was dim and quiet. She peered through the small window in the door and froze. Inside, Ethan was sitting upright, his expression hollow, confused. He was surrounded by his new team, nurses in crisp white, machines whirring softly. But there was no warmth, no laughter, no familiar voice telling him he wasn't alone. She saw him look toward the door, his eyes distant, searching. For a moment, their gazes met through the glass. His hand lifted weakly as though reaching for her. Mr. Cross, please rest, one of the private nurses said, adjusting his pillow. He nodded, but his eyes never left the door where she stood. Alina stepped back, pressing a trembling hand to her chest. She knew deep down that he remembered her, not just as his nurse, but as the voice that called him back from the darkness. And as she turned to leave, a quiet resolve settled in her heart. She wouldn't let the world take that away from him, or her, because something miraculous had begun the night he woke up, and neither of them yet knew just how much it would change both their lives. 3 weeks had passed since the miracle, since the night Ethan Cross opened his eyes. The world had exploded with headlines. Business tycoon awakens from coma. Miracle recovery stuns doctors. Cross Industries CEO defies death. Cameras lined the hospital gates. News drones hovered outside the windows, and rumors spun like wildfire. Everyone wanted a piece of the story, everyone except Alina. She had been moved to the geriatrics ward, far from the sterile luxury of the VIP floor. Her shifts were longer now, heavier, filled with patients who barely remembered their own names. Yet, every time she washed a frail hand or adjusted a pillow, she thought of him, of Ethan, alone behind tinted glass, trapped in a world that saw him only as a headline. She tried to forget. She tried to bury it. But the human heart does not obey logic, and hers refused to let go. Late one evening, as she was finishing rounds, a voice startled her. Nurse Rivera? She turned sharply. A young orderly stood in the hallway, glancing around nervously before handing her a sealed envelope. This was left at the security desk. No sender's name. Curious, she opened it. Inside was a simple note, handwritten in shaky but unmistakable script. Why did you stop singing? Her breath hitched. There was no signature, but she didn't need one. She knew that handwriting. The letters uneven, struggling, but alive. Ethan. Her heart raced. He remembered. He remembered her voice. That night she sat in her small apartment, staring at the note. She knew she shouldn't respond. It was likely being watched, and the legal advisor, Richard Cole, had warned her of strict confidentiality. Still, something inside her rebelled. He wasn't just a patient anymore. He was someone who'd reached out from beyond the veil of unconsciousness to find her again. Finally, she took a pen and wrote a short reply on a plain sheet of paper. Because they told me I wasn't allowed near you anymore. But I never stopped caring. She hesitated before adding a final line. Keep fighting. Ethan, I'm still here. She folded the note and left it at the security desk. The same way his had reached her. Days passed. No response came. She told herself it was foolish to expect one, that perhaps someone had intercepted it. But then, one night as she was leaving her shift, she heard her name whispered softly in the quiet corridor. Alina. She froze. The voice was hoarse, deep, familiar. Turning slowly, she saw him, Ethan Cross, standing at the far end of the hallway, leaning heavily on a cane. He wore a hospital gown under a gray robe, his posture unsteady, but his eyes were bright, alive. Mr. Cross? She breathed, disbelief washing over her. You shouldn't be out of bed. He smiled faintly, his lips trembling. Couldn't sleep. The walls up there, they don't breathe. And I needed to see the person who kept talking to me when everyone else gave up. Her throat tightened. You remember? He nodded. Bits and pieces. Your voice. It was the only thing that kept me from letting go. She stepped closer, afraid to even blink in case he disappeared. They'll be furious if they find you here. I don't care, he said quietly. You were the only one who treated me like I wasn't already gone. Silence filled the space between them. Heavy, electric, fragile. She didn't know whether to cry or smile. How much do you remember? She asked softly. Not everything, he admitted. The accident. Fragments of noise, glass, and then nothing. But in that nothingness, I remember a voice telling me to hold on. I didn't know who it belonged to. I thought maybe it was something divine. She looked down, her cheeks flushed. It wasn't divine. It was just me, a tired nurse who didn't know when to stop talking. He chuckled, a low sound that warmed the sterile corridor. Then maybe that's what miracles really are. Ordinary people who don't know when to stop caring. Before she could respond, the echo of hurried footsteps broke the moment. A security guard rounded the corner, followed by Richard Cole, his face twisted in fury. Mr. Cross. Cole's voice snapped through the silence like a whip. What in God's name are you doing here? You're risking your recovery and your privacy. Ethan's expression hardened, the spark in his eyes cooling. I'm not a prisoner, Richard. With all due respect, sir, there are protocols. I've had enough protocols to last a lifetime, Ethan interrupted. He looked back at Alina, his voice gentler now. Please don't get into trouble because of me. Cole stepped between them, his tone icy. Nurse Rivera, your presence here is unauthorized. If I see you near Mr. Cross again, you'll face disciplinary action and potential legal consequences. Alina's heart pounded, but she said nothing. She watched helplessly as Ethan was guided away, his cane tapping rhythmically on the tile floor until he disappeared around the corner. That night, she sat alone in the empty locker room, tears blurring her vision. The weight of injustice pressed on her chest. She had saved him, given him life, and now she was being erased from his story. But even through the ache, something flickered inside her, hope. Because in those few stolen minutes, she had seen something in his eyes, something the world couldn't hide or control. Gratitude, connection, recognition, and she knew then that Ethan Cross wasn't the kind of man who would let the truth be buried. The next morning, the hospital buzzed with rumors. Staff whispered in corners, eyes darting toward Alina whenever she passed. She could feel the judgment, the curiosity, the quiet pity. Word had spread quickly. The nurse who broke protocol, the nurse who got too close to the billionaire patient. She kept her head down, moving through her rounds like a ghost. Every beep, every scent of antiseptic, every hollow hallway reminded her of him. Yet she hadn't seen Ethan since that night. Security was tighter than ever. His floor was sealed, his room guarded. She tried to convince herself that it was over, that maybe he'd forgotten her again. But fate, once again, refused to let them drift apart. It was a Thursday evening when it happened. She was helping an elderly patient with her dinner when her supervisor called her to the front desk. There's a visitor for you, she said, tone sharp. You're lucky I even allowed it, Alina frowned. A visitor? Waiting in the lobby stood a tall man in a charcoal suit, not Cole, but someone younger, with an air of quiet confidence. Nurse Rivera? He asked politely. Mr. Cross requests to see you, privately. Her heart stopped. He asked for me? Yes, he's being transferred to the Cross Family Rehabilitation Center tomorrow. He insisted on seeing you before he leaves. Her pulse quickened. Against her better judgment and her supervisor's icy glare, she followed him through the familiar corridors, back toward the ward she'd been banned from. The air felt heavier there, quieter, as if every sound carried consequence. When she entered room 407, her breath caught in her throat. Ethan was sitting by the window, dressed in a crisp white shirt, his posture still frail but dignified. The city lights reflected in the glass behind him, painting him in gold and shadow. He turned when he heard her. And for a moment, the exhaustion, the pain, the noise of the world, all vanished. You came, he said softly. I wasn't sure if I'd be allowed, she replied. He smiled faintly. I wasn't sure they'd let me ask. But I reminded them I'm still the one signing their paychecks. She laughed despite herself, a fragile sound that broke the tension. Then silence fell, and they simply looked at each other. I owe you more than I can ever repay, he said finally. The doctors told me what happened that night. You saved my life, she shook her head. I just did my job. No, he said gently. You did more. You brought me back when everyone else had already given up. I heard your voice in the dark, Alina. Every word, every song. You gave me something to hold on to. Her eyes burned with unshed tears. I didn't think you could hear me. I couldn't, not at first. But then, little by little, I started to. It was like being at the bottom of a lake, hearing faint echoes above the surface. Your voice. It was light. She looked away, trying to steady herself. You should focus on healing now. You've got a whole world waiting for you. Your company, your people, your family. A shadow crossed his face. That's just it. I don't know if I want that world anymore. Lying there trapped in silence, I realized how empty it all was. The money, the power, it didn't mean a thing when I was one heartbeat away from never waking up. She said nothing, but she understood. She'd seen too many people learn that truth too late, he continued, his voice low. I want to start over. Live differently. And I want to make sure the people who helped me, people like you, aren't forgotten. She smiled faintly. That's kind of you to say, but I don't need anything. Just knowing you're alive is enough. He hesitated, studying her face. You really mean that? I do. For a long moment they sat in silence, the world outside their own reflection blurring in the window glass. Then he reached into the drawer beside him and handed her an envelope. I know you'll refuse anything material, but this isn't money. It's a letter for you. Read it when I'm gone. She took it, her fingers trembling. What is it? Thank you, he said simply. From a man who had everything but nothing that truly mattered, until a nurse reminded him what being human felt like. Before she could respond, the door opened. Richard Cole entered, his expression carefully neutral. Mr. Cross, the car's ready. Ethan's eyes softened. I'll be there in a moment. Cole nodded and left, leaving them in their fragile bubble of quiet one last time. He turned back to her. They'll take me away from this place, but not from what I owe you. Promise me something, Alina. She nodded slowly. Anything. Don't lose that heart of yours, he said. The world will try to harden it, make you question it, but it's your greatest gift. Don't ever let them take that from you. She swallowed the lump in her throat. I won't. He smiled softly, an expression filled with gratitude, sorrow, and something unspoken. Goodbye, Alina. When he left, she stood by the window long after his car disappeared into the night. The letter felt heavy in her hand. She didn't open it right away. She couldn't. Something told her it wasn't just a thank you note. It was the closing of a chapter, the end of something sacred. But destiny, she would soon learn, wasn't done writing their story yet, because inside that letter was something that would change both their lives forever. The letter sat untouched on Alina's nightstand for days. She would glance at it sometimes while getting ready for her shift, its neat envelope stark against the clutter of her small apartment. But every time she tried to open it, her heart would falter. She told herself she was too tired, too busy, that maybe she already knew what it said. But the truth was simpler and heavier. She was afraid of what words from a man like Ethan Cross might do to her fragile peace. Afraid of reopening something she had barely managed to close. It wasn't until one rainy evening, after a grueling double shift, that she finally gave in. The city outside her window was blurred by raindrops and the flickering amber glow of traffic lights. Exhaustion wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. She sat down, took a breath, and carefully broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of fine stationery, his handwriting sharp yet steady. Alina, if you're reading this, I've already left the hospital and begun the long road of recovery. Not just for my body, but for my life. And I need to tell you something I couldn't say out loud that day. You didn't just save my life, Alina. You reminded me of what a life is supposed to feel like. When I lay there in the dark, I heard your voice. It wasn't the words that saved me. It was the kindness behind them. It was knowing that someone cared even when they didn't have to. Before the accident, I thought I had everything. But all I really had were walls, ones I built so high that no one could reach me. You broke through those walls without even trying. You told me once that people heal best when they're treated like they matter. You were right. And because of you, I've decided to build something that matters. I'm establishing a foundation, the Rivera Initiative. It will fund training, resources, and scholarships for nurses and caregivers who dedicate their lives to compassion, the way you did. You won't find your name on it publicly. I know you'd refuse that, but I wanted you to know it exists because of you. And there's one more thing. I don't know if fate will ever let our paths cross again. But if it does, I hope it's when both of us are free, me from my past and you from your doubts. Until then, take care of yourself the way you take care of everyone else. Ethan. Her vision blurred as she read the final lines. She pressed the paper to her chest, a tremor running through her. It wasn't a confession of love, not exactly, but it was something deeper. A promise, a bridge between two souls from different worlds. In the weeks that followed, Alina's life began to shift in small but profound ways. Her colleagues, once skeptical and gossipy, started to look at her differently, respectfully. The head nurse reinstated her full privileges without a word. Patients requested her by name. Months passed, and the world moved on. Ethan Cross became a quiet legend, his company thriving under new ethics-driven leadership. Articles mentioned his miraculous recovery, but few knew the story behind it. Fewer still knew about the foundation quietly transforming the lives of thousands of caregivers across the country. One afternoon, a letter arrived at the hospital addressed to Nurse A. Rivera. Inside was a formal invitation embossed with gold. The Rivera Initiative Annual Gala, honoring the unsung hearts of healing. Her breath caught at the sight of it. At the bottom of the card, handwritten in familiar pen strokes, was a single line. It's time we met again. The evening of the gala. She stood before the mirror in a simple navy blue dress, her reflection trembling with nerves. She wasn't used to this kind of world. Chandeliers, velvet halls, the glitter of wealth. Yet as she entered the ballroom, something inside her steadied. She had walked through far worse places. The event was beautiful, soft music, laughter, the hum of gratitude. Photos of nurses from across the nation filled the walls, stories of lives changed because of the initiative. When Ethan finally appeared on stage, a hush fell over the crowd. He looked stronger now, still using a cane, but standing tall. His eyes scanned the audience until they found hers, and for a heartbeat it felt as though no one else existed. He spoke about second chances, about gratitude, about the power of kindness to wake the sleeping parts of the human soul. Then he gestured toward her. There's someone here tonight who reminds me that miracles aren't about light from the heavens, he said softly. They're about the small, quiet acts of courage that ripple outward. This foundation wouldn't exist without one such act. Applause filled the room as spotlights turned toward her. Alina's face flushed with emotion. She hadn't expected recognition, hadn't wanted it. But as Ethan stepped down from the stage and walked toward her, the world seemed to hold its breath. When he reached her, he extended his hand. You told me people heal best when they're treated like they matter, he said, his voice just for her. You made me believe that. Now it's my turn to remind you that you matter too. Tears shimmered in her eyes. You didn't have to do all this, she whispered. He smiled. I didn't do it for me. I did it for everyone who deserves to be seen the way you saw me. In that moment, surrounded by applause and light, it wasn't about wealth or class or titles. It was about the simple, quiet truth that one act of compassion, one brave heart refusing to turn away, could change everything. Later that night, when most of the guests had gone, they stood together by the glass balcony overlooking the city. The air was cool, the skyline glowing like a constellation. Ethan turned to her. You know, he said, the doctors said it was impossible for me to wake up. But you didn't listen to impossible. She smiled faintly. Maybe because I've seen too many miracles to stop believing in them. He looked at her then, eyes soft with something that felt like peace. So have I. They stood in silence. Two souls bound by something beyond circumstance. A bond forged in light and struggle, and the fragile miracle of being alive. As the night wind carried the distant hum of the city below, Alina finally understood what the letter truly meant. It wasn't just gratitude. It was a reminder that the smallest kindness can awaken the greatest change. And sometimes the miracle isn't that someone wakes up from a coma. It's that they wake up to life.